How do we think about seeing on the news every day that some leader has gotten caught doing some corruption, stealing, lying, some sort of thing that got them fired from their position, disgraced? A couple comments. One, it's depressing. It's okay to feel that. It's okay to mourn and be frustrated and disappointed. Number two, it's old. We've seen these sort of issues with human beings for a long time throughout history. And so it's not just in the news. It's not just today and nowadays. It's an issue with humankind. I think the good thing is we can learn from it. It's instructive for us to see how they went down that path, how the snowball picked up momentum going down that hill into an avalanche of problems, so that we can stop ourselves earlier, so that it doesn't happen to us, so that we can learn from somebody else's foolishness. I think one thing it starts with often is expediency. I don't know if you know that word, but it just basically means shortcuts, doing things that you think you'll fix later, things you think are minor issues, but you really want to get the thing done. So this is the easiest way. I think it often starts like that. Sometimes that means the ends justify the means. That's a mentality that I can use whatever means really because this goal is really important. I think that's where moral convictions do matter. Uh, they may stop somebody, they hopefully stop somebody at that point where they say, no, my moral convictions are such that these means are not acceptable to me. I don't want to, people use the phrase, I don't want to live with myself. I couldn't live with myself if I did that. I don't know if that's the right phrase, but it would bother my conscience, I think is what they mean. And I think they think to themselves, no, this is wrong on some sort of level. This is something that it may help you have a religion, some that you actually believe in. I think that oftentimes people have moral convictions, religion, mores that they got from their grandparents who really were religious or had moral convictions. And so they've passed those down. And so it seems like those are common sense. But they're not really now to the grandkid a moral conviction. They're just something that was passed on, kind of an heirloom, a tradition. And so when there's a good reason why to skimp, take a shortcut, then it doesn't apply to me in that situation. I can change these traditions that were passed on to me. So that's where this is a big thing to say, no, I actually think there is some guy in the sky out there who actually notices, who actually cares that I'm actually doing something substantially wrong here with how human beings were designed or something like that. That sort of conviction can, I think, stop things earlier. I think it's difficult on motivation when we look at these situations. We see arrogance sometimes. We see just a greed or just a passion to be famous or to succeed that causes some of the problems early on, or what we see that accelerating the problem later. I think it can also be people who have gotten to somewhere in terms of their career, that they're bored or something, and so there's just a seeking after pleasure or something like that. So motivation is really quite difficult sometimes to figure out. Like why would they bring down their entire life and their family and everything they've built? So. And then later in the process, there's lies. And along with that, secrecy, and then oftentimes threats too. So then we start seeing the ugly, it's gotten beyond them. It's become an ugly in terms of what it's doing to the people around them, where they're forcing them to be secret about it and to carry out these things. And they're threatening people who get in their way. So this is something I think you should think about, because none of us ever want to be a whistleblower. None of us want to speak up really. No, none of us hopes to be in some organization where the leader, who we tend to usually admire and believe in and are excited about, uh, they end up being somebody who has this dark side, which is quite destructive. So I think it's worth asking yourself, like, what would it take? Would I ever speak up? Maybe if it started to hurt these people, where the product we were making ended up, being contaminated, and so people's lives were people were getting sick and dying. Those sort of situations, and I think that is the situation that often happens. That there is something that's coming out of my organization that's actually destroying people, and therefore I have to have the courage to speak up. And first, I think what most good people do is they do speak up within. They sort of say, this must just be a misunderstanding. We can't be doing this. I'm sure I'm wrong about this. And oftentimes there's a good excuse that's given to them, and so they move on. But sometimes there really is something, and they realize that they've found something and they've pulled on something, and there's way more there. And it's not getting better since they just spoke up, I saw this thing. It's actually getting much worse, or there's much more there, and it's getting covered up and that sort of thing. So I think I just want to encourage you to just think about that may be something that a lot of human beings, I don't know, does every human being have to do that in their lives, to speak up and say, I think this is wrong? And we don't want to be shrill. We don't want to be panicky or whatever. I understand that there's reluctance on that. But at the same time, I think that's part of living in organizations, in living in this world well. That's what somebody who would be a leader of an organization, a good leader, that's what they would do lower in an organization. And I'm not saying that that's going to go well with you. That's going to always work out. Oftentimes, whistleblowers actually have a very hard life and hard time, but it's still the right way to live, to speak up for the vulnerable. And last, I think one final thing I just want to poke you with is then, how do you receive complaints and concerns when you are in power? When you get questioned, do you respond defensively with agitation and rage and retaliation at the nerve of the person to question you? Or are you, cut to the heart, in grief, concern openly, like, oh my goodness, did I say something? I am so sorry. Is that what happened? Is that what's going on? We have got to fix that. Are you open to the kind of concerns? Because what's really interesting is as we rise through organizations, we become numb to the kind of effects our words, our actions, our decisions, our lack of decisions are having on the vulnerable, on the suffering. And so we have to be soft and realize that even though becoming a leader means you're thinking about lots of issues and big picture stuff in a large organization, we still have to be sensitive to that one person, the individual who's getting harmed, even though we didn't mean to, in the gears of our organization. So that's a little bit of what I wanted us to think about when we see these stories of people falling, leaders falling in the news.